Thanks, guys. Awesome.
No worries. No worries.
Okay, we'll start off with our greeting and land acknowledgement. So before we start our panel, let's begin with acknowledging the land and the people of the land. Toronto Field Naturalist wishes to acknowledge this land with which we walk. For thousands of years, the land has been shared by the Wendat, the Haudenosaunee, the Haudenosaunee. Um, Toronto is situated on the lands within the Toronto Purchase Treaty 13, the traditional and treaty lands of the Mississauga of the Credit First Nation. This territory is also part of the Dish with One Spoon Wampum, a covenant between the Haudenosaunee, the Haudenosaunee, the Wendat peoples, and allied peoples to peaceably share the land and all its resources. Today, the land is home to peoples of numerous nations. We are grateful to have this opportunity to continue to care for and share the beauty of this land. Thank you so much with the whole lecture team for organizing our lecture series, including today's lecture on the decades-long advocacy work of the Friends of the Spit. I'll introduce our two guest speakers, Carley and Garth Riley, in a few moments. First, here's an introduction on the topic today. Since 1977, Friends of the Split have been advocating that the entire Leslie Spit and Baselands in Toronto be preserved as a public urban wilderness car-free with no admission charges. In 1977, the visionary founders of the Friends of the Split recognized the potential for this growing man-made split of land. And since then, Friends of the Split advocacy has been strong, consistent, constant, and quite effective. But before we start, let me welcome you. But before we start, let me welcome all of you who are joining today. This event has been shared on several social media channels aside from the TFN website. Please share in the chat how you heard about it. We hope you'll come again. We'll hope you'll also join TFN. Now, I'm delighted to introduce John Carley. John Carley is a retired architect. Since 1986, he has been co-chair of Friends of the Spit, a citizens advocacy group established in 1977 dedicated to preserving the entire Leslie Street Spit as a public urban wilderness. Their website is www.friendsspit.ca. As an architect and birder, John was a volunteer member of the City of Toronto Committee, which produced the Bird-Friendly Development Guidelines, mandatory since 2010, as part of the Toronto Green Standard. Currently, he is a board member of FLAP Canada. In addition to his advocacy work for the Spit, John initiated and coordinated the Toronto Centre Butterfly Count, an annual census. It'd be interesting to get a consensus among the butterflies, now entering its 31st year. Garth Riley. Garth is a retired director of the Public Health Ontario Laboratories. Since 2050, Garth has been co-chair of Friends of the Spit. You guys must have some good stories together, working co-chairs for so long, man. Can't even imagine all the stories there. Anyways, a citizens advocacy group established in 1977 dedicated to preserving the entire Leslie Spit as a public urban wilderness. As a birder with a strong interest of all nature, Garth has been an active member of multiple birding and naturalist clubs in Ontario. He is currently a section lead for 2 Squares as part of the Ontario Breeding Bird Atlas project and contributes to many other citizen science projects. And now, John and Garth, the floor is yours.
Great. This is good. Thanks, Garth. And thank you for the fulsome introduction. By now, you've probably all realized that Friends of the Spit want the entire Leslie Street Spit and Baselands to be a public urban wilderness, car-free and open to the public. So thank you at TFN for asking us to speak. And thank you also very much for your involvement through the decades. TFN members and the organization itself were highly involved in all our lobbying through the decades. So thank you. We owe you a great deal of thanks. And also, considering the land acknowledgement, we also like to do a water acknowledgement to say that the spit is all entirely man-made, and the waters where the spit is were used by our indigenous peoples for centuries and eons. This lecture comes at a really important time in the development of the spit. You wouldn't think so 48 years in or so, but the TRCA and the city are embarking on a visitor experience plan. And they've hired high-powered consultants, and we'll speak about that. And we are hoping that once again, we can call on TFN members and the TFN itself to support us. So this is what you heard, Peter, in the introduction. We're an all-volunteer group and founded in 1977. We have 1,200 members through the 80s and 90s. We dipped a bit, and we're well over 1,200 members now. The spit itself, for those who don't know, tough thing about Zoom is I can't ask people to put up their hands, but it's at the base of Leslie Spit Street in Toronto. It's a 5-kilometer long landform of 500 hectares area. What we want to cover in our talk tonight is a really brief, condensed history of the spit. Both Garth and I could talk for 5 hours on it. We'll try not. We want to talk about the sheer joys of the place. We want to talk about our 4 realms of our work, which was access, use, securing the boundaries, and defense, and then talk a little bit about the conclusions we've come to about citizen advocacy. So you start by saying through the 70s and 80s, this was raw space. And the first question you say that we were always asked is, how could anybody love this place? How could anybody like it? It's wild. It's not manicured. It's not a traditional park. There are no amenities. It's rough. It's wild. It was made of crap from other developments. It's steel and rebars and poking out like that. And I have to say that personally, I went out there the first time like this, and it was sheer joy to have water on both sides of you, no sounds of the city, wind, just the elements. It's a gorgeous, gorgeous place. And I think you either get it or you don't. But clearly, there is even before Friends of Spit, this is 1972, people wanted out there. It appealed to people. They wanted out there. The access became our first issue. And Friends of the Spit did get access out there. And initially, access was granted with harbor police present. By the 80s, the chain link barrier was up with a turnstile. And that's how you got in. Weekends only, limited hours. But that was how access got achieved. And frankly, I recall one meeting with the Harbor Commission in the 80s where one of the high-pitched staff turned to me and said that the Harbor Commission's biggest mistake was letting people out there. And these are sort of the images of what it's like. Contrast that to pictures we'll show later. And then came the ring-billed gull controversy, which there were 75,000 pairs at its highlight. It seemed to freak people out. People were calling for eradication. The boaters were all mad that their boats were being pooped on. And think ahead now to where we are today with the cormorants. But these same issues were there. But it did register on important people like Roger Torrey Peterson. This is him on the spit in '85. And he wrote about it in Birdwatcher's Digest that year, how wonderful it was that this could happen. The land started to be discovered by birders. And this is 76, so I'm back and forth in time, but see how raw it was at that time. Just and raw views. Also, a different skyline, a very different skyline from what we have now. And these are all pictures from our archives. Things are starting to green up now in 84. And finally, by 1993, it was a significant year. That was the year the master plan as amended was adopted for the spit by the Conservation Authority. But you had a journalist like Marcus G. writing about the spit in glowing terms and saying that while all the debate was going on, nature decided the issue. But the interesting thing about that article was, and it goes back to our title, he made it sound so evident and obvious that it would be a public urban wilderness. But it never was obvious and it never was evident. It took the dedicated work of a lot of people, Friends of the Spit, various naturalist clubs, TFN, citizens at large. There was no accident at all. And that's the central theme of our thesis. It's because of citizen advocacy that and the support of our allies that this happened. And contrast that today, citizen advocacy seems to be in disrepair and disrepute with our governments. So we go back in time, just want to take us back in time to when the item titled marsh there, that's Ashbridge's Bay Marsh, 1,000-acre marsh. This is 1815, and the islands were then joined to the mainland. George Fairfield, a TFN member, a TOC member, documented this in a wonderful book. It's available in the library, and it tells the story of how the marsh was gradually filled in, but what it meant to those who were there. This slide is educational in that it shows the development of the spit over the years. 59, nothing was happening at the base of Leslie Street, and in fact, the shipping channel got enlarged since 59. And then gradually you can plot the expansion of the spit and the filling in of it through those years. This is a wonderfully scary aspirational slide from 1967. It shows Harbor City, which was the Ebb Zeidler design following his success at Ontario Place, where he took over the airport and built a lagoon city. Look at the airport out at the south end of the islands, but also the spit is shown much as it was in the 69 aerial photo. Then in 1976, a team of architects and planners came up with this aquatic park design. And what I've got circled in the oval is the amount of land that was going to be left for nature. The rest is boat clubs, and those of you with good eyes can read the boat clubs, can see the campground. You'll even see in the white area at the right, it says marine land, it says hotel, etc., etc. But while this was happening, Friends of the Spit, the next year, Friends of the Spit was organized, and in 1982, the TRCA was given control of the planning process. Essentially, the aquatic park plan stalled, nothing happened, and in the meantime, that access of people started a groundswell, and then the TRCA started holding public meetings in 1982. We found this quote from Tommy Thompson. After he died, the board of the TRCA named the park after him, and we were fortunate enough to find this quote and use it at every meeting. We then started advocacy at a very basic level of pamphlets with self-guided tours, brochures. We treated the spit like it was our land, and we started all that sort of advocacy. And while this was happening, while more and more people were enjoying it, the TRCA embarked on a series of designs. They had 4 proposals in 1986. I won't show you them all, but proposal A was the all-natural option. And I've circled in red the Baselands because they were a future industrial park at that time. However, A was what we advocated. We lost. D was put into place. There's the same future industrial park, but if you look at the design here, Nature is essentially the 1/3 on the left. There's 350 car parking, about 8 sailing clubs out there. And even at this time, though, they were showing cell 1 as a marsh, which previous iterations showed it as a parking lot. Those were part of a submission in '89 to the Ontario government for a master plan and environmental assessment. While that was being debated, the Harbor Commission started to build their Outer Harbor Marina. And I have this slide just so you can see how raw the Baselands is. We'll come back to it. But parallel with this master plan process and waiting for it was Crombie Commission, which was truly known as the Royal Commission on the Future of the Toronto Waterfront, and their recommendations in their interim report. And this started to build institutional support for the Spit as a public urban wilderness. And the EA and master plan, because of Crombie, because of these recommendations, started to stall. And then in December '92, the addendum came out, and the addendum framed what is now the enshrined master plan. We think it was our advocacy, our members, all this built up urge, and the Royal Commission. And also the Conservation Authority started undergoing a sea change. They appointed new directors. Bob Ray was premier. For what we think or may not think of him, Bob appointed progressive people to the board, and we started to win our way. And this became the map that governs what's happening now. And the only compromise Friends of the Spit made was to finally accept the 100-boat sailing club on the condition that when the park was open full-time, there'd be no private automobile access. We essentially, at this point, we'd won the battle of use. And even on their website, in a previous iteration, the TRCA acknowledged the persistence of local groups, Friends of the Spit, and you folks, TFN. So now I'm going to turn it over to Garth, and he's going to continue speaking about our advocacy.
Thanks, John. Well, after that thorough presentation of the history of the Spit and the discussion of the extreme hurdles that the people of Toronto overcame in order to safeguard this beautiful peninsula as a natural area, I'm going to discuss a little bit about the importance of stewardship, citizen science, and advocacy at the Spit in order to ensure that it stays front and center in the minds of the politicians and relevant organizations, that it's important to maintain this area as a natural area. You may be aware, but the Spit is has a complex group of shared responsibilities, which include the Conservation Authority, the City of Toronto, Ports Toronto, Create TO, the Provincial Ministry of Natural Resources and Forestry, as well. Waterfront Toronto has some degree of involvement in the layout and what happens with the future of the Spit. And just touching on that, one of the ways of getting the advocacy going was to produce these checklists. In 1988, the first checklist of the birds of the Spit came out, and it covered the 284 species of birds that had been seen at the Spit. Similarly, the members of Friends of the Spit also produced a checklist of the plants. I believe at the time it numbered about 400 species. And to emphasize the importance of the ecology of this landform, this pamphlet was developed in 1992 and was distributed to all members of the Metro Toronto and Region Conservation Authority Board, as well as to the local councillor. So here's just a few shots of some of the exotic plants that we're seeing out on the Spit.
Thanks, Garth. And I'm back to talk about, back to that theme of use, of access, use, and boundaries, and then our defense. This has to do with boundaries. This is the Baselands that's in the red ellipse are the lands called the Baselands. And they were pretty much meadows in 1990 and in early 90s meadows. These are some shots of that area, grasses, some piles of rubble, and that's about it. So then we were surprised, and this is one of our newsletters from 96. We were surprised that a proponent put forward a scheme to TEDCO for a golf driving range, 18 acres. And you can see in the sketch the amount of the Baselands it was going to take up. We immediately reacted. This is the event that had 50 faxes over a weekend go to Mayor Hall. The TFN entered the fray through Gene McDonald, who wrote a very good rebuttal to the scheme. Many people showed up to the public meeting, and it was defeated by a 3-2 vote with, of all things, Councillor Tom Jacobek casting the deciding vote to kibosh the scheme. So that goes to our theory that politicians are always politicians, but it was a very odd thing. Later, we were successful in getting Councillor Pam McConnell to change that zoning of the Baselands, which was industrial, and there was an industrial subdivision plan for it, to send that all out and zone it GR, which is the most restrictive zoning of park space in the city, and it's also what the rest of the Spit is zoned as. So the important thing to take away from this is that then we solidified the boundaries of the Spit, not just the natural areas, but the physical boundaries up to Unwin Avenue in the north. And because we were always afraid that they would cut us off somewhere on the peninsula and make nature just the end. So now back to Garth again.
Okay. So when you look at the Spit today, this is a shot over Embayment D. It's difficult to remember that it is a man-made structure. Most of the components of the Spit are not natural and therefore require some human intervention to ensure the stability and safety of the lands. The TRCA has been involved in stabilizing the shoreline, planting native species where appropriate, and managing invasive species. These initiatives by the TRCA, while in line with the master plan, are also not without controversy. So here are a few images of the Spit taken by the members of Friends of the Spit, as well as members of our Facebook group. And it's always interesting to hear that from people who are not necessarily nature lovers, but just appreciate the Spit for its beauty. These include hikers, runners, walkers, cyclists, photographers, etc. The value of the tranquility of the Spit was especially notable during COVID, when the numbers of people visiting the Spit just skyrocketed. The numbers have since dropped, but we have gained a lot of new fans and supporters. One of the things that we heard, and we're glad to hear, was how important visiting the Spit is for the mental health of individuals. It breaks them away from the city. They don't realize they're in this concrete jungle anymore. Now, no talk about the Spit would be complete without some discussion about the large double-crested cormorant colony located there. As John mentioned earlier on, the similarities between the large gull population and now the large cormorant population was not without controversy and involving people who just wanted to do away with them all. The cormorants started to establish themselves at the Spit in 1990 when there were 6 nests, and they quickly expanded and reached a peak of 13,000, a little over 13,000 nests in 2016. And to the credit of the TRCA during this period, their focus was less on trying to manage the cormorant population on the spit, but more to try and protect the forest canopy. There was concern that the cormorants were displacing the large black-crowned night heron colony there. And just to give you a few more numbers, the black-crowned night herons started nesting in 1980, and there were 42 nests. And the peak was in the year 2000 when there was 1,235 nests. Now, a lot of the program for management of these actually quite beautiful birds was to encourage them to nest on the ground. And at one point, they had a success rate where about 70% of all the nesting cormorants were nesting on the ground. Unfortunately, the night heron colony continued to suffer. And many people believe that some of the methods used to discourage the cormorants from nesting in the trees also disrupted the night herons. And surprisingly, while this was going on, the ring-billed gull colony began to disappear from the spit. I believe there was a peak of around 75,000 nests, and in 2023 there was around 3,500 nests. And this year, we're not sure that there were actually any nests nesting ring-billed gulls on the spit. So now what we find is, as you know, ecosystems are always in transition. And now the cormorants are finding other locations, such as the Toronto Islands, which they seem to prefer to nest. In an attempt to draw the cormorants away from the islands and to the spit, the TRCA constructed this wooden platform, and you can see in the photo on the right that it is being used by cormorants. But we're waiting to see just how successful this will be. Now this slide shows, this is actually cell 1, while the fill was still being put in cell 1. And you can see there's a turn raft, and this was, again, one of the initiatives of the TRCA to try and provide an area to encourage species at risk. So this is for common terns. Now this was cell 2, and cell 2, this was the opening day. You can see there's a few dignitaries there. Ralph Toniger on the left, and Bill Graham from the federal government. Brian Denny, who was a good friend of the Friends of the Spit, who was the CEO of the TRCA, and Mayor John Tory. Now, just to give you a little bit of history, originally the cells 1, 2, and 3 were created as areas where material dredged from the Keating Channel could be disposed. The environmental rules which came into play as the spit was being constructed didn't allow for dumping into open water, these materials, because they were contaminated. And the result of this was the construction of the Indictment Road and the severing of the Spine Road and the installation of the movable pedestrian bridge. So once cell 1 reached capacity, this is cell 2 on opening day. But once cell 1 reached capacity, the decision was made to cap the contaminated material dumped here with clay. The original plan had been to put in a 400-car parking lot here, but thanks to the pioneering proposal by the TRCA, a wetland was created instead. And this is, as you can see in this current photo, was quite successful. And this process, as I mentioned, was again repeated in 2016 once cell 2 reached its capacity. Cell 3 is expected to reach capacity in it's about another 50 years. And the otters seem to enjoy it. Now, as you may be aware, the spit was declared a globally significant important bird area. And the latest checklist that we have from 2024 now has a total of 334 species. Since publication of this checklist, 3 more species are awaiting acceptance by the Ontario Bird Records Committee in order to be added, and they'll be added to the next checklist. The three birds that are going to be added are swallowtail kite, neotropic cormorant, and tufted duck. And just to share some of the beautiful photos and some of the beautiful birds you can be seen out there. There's a common nighthawk. There's a purple sandpiper, Blackburnian warbler, yellow-breasted chat. And this is not a well-kept secret, but in winter, the spit is a magnet for owls. Now, they're not always easy to find, but they're out there. And this is another lovely shot, but one of our members, Mike McInnes, of a young peregrine falcon. And the falcons don't nest there, but they really do enjoy hunting out on the spit. Spit's also a great spot for butterflies. To date, 59 species have been recorded, and there's a lot of many other insects out on the spit as well. Ed O'Connor put together an odonate checklist, which is available on the Friends of the Spit website, and it lists 44 species of damselflies and dragonflies. Now, many animals have now made the spit their home. There's a beaver, American mink, and more recently, there's been as many as 5 white-tailed deer that seem to have settled in. Also, chimney swifts are taking advantage of the man-made structures. Now, if you use iNaturalist, I just want to let you know that there are projects in iNaturalist which document the species at the spit, and if you link your iNaturalist records to that project, they'll go into the database. Right now, the last time I checked, the wildlife of Tommy Thompson Park on iNaturalist had a total of 1,269 insects, 110 arachnids, 599 plants, 102 fungi, and 22 mammals.
Well, I'm back again. I think those iNaturalist lists would have been a big help to us arguing our case back in the 80s, but there was no social media, no listing like that. But it's a wonderful tool to tell legislators what is out there and just how important it is. As part of the master plan, the TRCA established an advisory committee. And that advisory committee later became a user group and later was disbanded in 2020 by the TRCA themselves. But while it was operating, it gave us essentially a window into what Friends of Spit we're calling our 4th iteration, and that's of vigilance and defense. And in other words, part of it's trying to make the authorities aware of its value and also not have them make it like every other park in the city. And those changes can often happen by small cuts, death by 1,000 cuts, if you want to call it that way. This slide indicates the feelings of one of our members of the advisory committee, and I think was heartfelt. The committee members were a couple of sailing reps, TFN rep, TEA rep, TOC rep, some volunteer naturalists, Friends of the Spit, of course, and believe it or not, there were 2 reps from Mountain Equipment Co-op, and we never figured out why they were there except to preserve their right for a marathon run. For anyone who doesn't get the spit, part of our defense is that it becomes a magnet for people's pet projects. Over the years, we've had people tell us about their plans for a marine museum out there, asked whether we'd support demonstration straw bale homes and underground homes. For a long time, someone kept writing into the Star proposing that the indictment arm be the new airport. Even one of the consultants came back and later proposed a Olympic-sized rowing court with an entirely new indictment arm being built to protect that. However, there were credible threats in this time. Um, this is from one of our newsletters in 2006. Parks Canada wanted to put a 30,000 square foot building out on the spit, out near Cell 1. The building would have nothing to do with the spit itself. It was there to advertise Parks Canada's other parks, and you could go in there and watch films and look at that. So it had no reason to be on the spit. It could have been anywhere in the GTA. And that proposal was defeated by us and our allies through a lot of work. Similarly, what you see happening here is Waterfront Toronto hired an American firm of consultants, and I call them the famous experts from afar. And they were in charge of designing the waterfront from the Eastern Gap all the way east to the eastern end of the beaches. And this is what they came up with the second try at the spit. The first try had a canal running east-west through the Baselands. This just had a big passage along with a circular boardwalk, which you show in all the other very arbitrary paths and lines. And gradually that went away because of a lot of pressure, the costing. The American consultants went away, they entered it, they won a prize for their design, but it never got built, and that's all for the better. But it caused us to issue this, which was through the aughts, and I think Garth and I both got tired of meeting at the city, but we'd meet city planners over and over again as they planned through this area. The most important being, of course, the new Mouth of the Don naturalization, which you see in the upper left. But we proposed that because there are minimal services south of the ship channel, that everything south of the ship channel should be parkland. Some would be more active, like the soccer fields that are there now, and the spit would be, and Baselands would be the passive recreation. But you can see the link through to the Don, and we still flog this plan now. Now, remember I talked about earlier about every politician is a politician. And we're showing this. This is the turbine at the CNE. And in our case with a politician, Jack Layton, our local councillor, who is a great supporter of Friends, one day went rogue and proposed 3 turbines out on the spit. And we protested. We filed a 110-page brief against it. The last thing you do in all the literature is put a wind turbine out in an important bird area. Our argument was a green industrial use shouldn't come at the expense of a green success. And all sorts of mayhem ensued. Jack got fairly bent out of shape. We appealed to the OMB, and we lifted our appeal to OMB after a series of negotiations in which we promised to support them at the CNE, and we put them in touch with our contacts on the CNE board. And so that's how that advocacy worked. So we prevailed in the defense from a major threat. And now Garth is going to take you through some more of the ongoing issues.
So as you're aware, as a nature organization, every now and then you think you've finally done it. You've accomplished everything you wanted to. But as you know, the challenges never end. They keep coming. So some of the things that are ongoing at the Spit are this kind of creative artwork, also known as tagging or graffiti. In 2021, there was the fairly large film set up there for, I believe it was for Aquaman. I guess from our perspective, we were given no notice of this. People just, our members said, what's going on out at the Spit? And we had no idea. So we successfully challenged it. The filming went on, but in future, we made our voice heard, and we know that they will let us know well in advance of any other proposed major productions out on the Spit.
And there's been no more.
And there's been no more since then, yes. Powercraft, this is in the East Cove. they present a problem because people don't realize coming in from the water that this is a nature reserve. Raves, especially during COVID, there were a number of raves out on the spit with huge numbers, hundreds of people, with vehicles, with sound equipment, partying through the night. And that was a huge disturbance to the wildlife out on the spit. There's one of the vehicles that was not, we're out in a restricted area. Now, some of the other things we're finding, and these are quite recent. The one on, it's a disturbing photo, but the one on the left, these were spotted by one of our friends, Paul Pryor, and he wondered what was going on here. And after speaking to the TRCA, we found out people were out in Abatement D and were trying to illegally catch snapping turtles for the meat. The painted turtles that were captured were bycatch and were just killed and tossed aside. I don't know what's happened with that. I don't know that any charges have been laid, but at least the TRCA is aware of it. But it's something that I never thought would happen out on the spit. And the other issue, while the TRCA promotes fishing at the spit, and in all of the waters around Toronto, some fishermen are more conscientious than others. And as you know, fishing line and these hooks present a significant danger to wildlife. Also, the spit has become an attractive area for the homeless. This elaborate construction was in the Baselands, in the wet woods. The proper authorities were notified, and the camp area was removed, but not before they decided to burn it down. And so that provided some damage to the Baselands. The other issue is traffic. We had talked about this before, but this includes cyclists now that you don't see these the snakes out on the roads trying to sun themselves. Even pedestrians can create problems for some of the smaller snakes, as well as the cars that still go out there to the sailing club.
So I'm back again to speak about the no cars issue. This is a 1984 slide used in a presentation by Verna Higgins, who is a professor of botany at U of T, to the TRCA. Back then, the argument was that the spit, no cars on the spit meant wildlife could flourish. No cars meant people could walk and run with impunity, not worry about being run over or the exhaust fumes. Kids could learn to bike out there. It was a lot safer, a lot better, and it flew in the face of what a public urban wilderness was. So that no cars was what I think you saw in an earlier slide. The Royal Commission agreed with the car-free environment. And this is now, so currently, the only cars allowed out there are emergency vehicles, the TRCA's own staff or approved vehicles, and the sailing club is allowed an emergency vehicle during park open hours, and they can drive out when the park is not officially open. When the park converts to being officially open, and I was just going to go through to there's the master plan that says that private vehicle access will be prohibited. Now, we've spoken about that because the yacht club, these lovely boats that are essentially floating cottages in Embayment C, they've had over 30 years to figure out a van service, a jitney service, a water taxi service, or whatever. Everybody with a condo in Toronto puts aside money a year. The sailing club didn't. They're on a minimal rent, a subsidized rent by our taxpayer city taxes, and they have all the enjoyments of the spit. And we raise this because this will be an issue in the coming visitor experience plan. We know that they want to advocate for the right to drive out, to their clubhouse. And that would be mayhem, a safety hazard, and would also go against the whole feeling of the Spit as an urban wilderness. This is the statement. This was a request for proposal for the visitor experience plan. And as I said, there's a publicity and facilitation firm. Lord Cultural Resources is another consultant, as is DTAH, who are the architects who did the pavilion at the base. I personally might look a little askance on this because I feel that when a consultant is engaged, it's very rare for a consultant to say, let it be. It's very rare for a consultant to say, do nothing. What we want out of this plan is a revenue basis for the spit between the city and the TRCA, a revenue sharing, a stable budget so the spit can be maintained and it can be staffed properly and looked after. Right now, the spit is neglected, and it's no longer benign neglect, it's neglect. And so upcoming on the Saturday of Thanksgiving weekend, so that's, I think, the 11th, the facilitator and some of the consultants will be there to get your reactions, and as well on Wednesday, the 15th in the morning. So that is where we hope you'll step in and go to bat for the spit again. There are going to be public meetings in the new year. Finally, if you haven't read this book by Walter Kem with photographs by Robert Burley, it's well worth the read. Friends of the Spit, Garth and I each have a chapter in there about the nature and about the origins of advocacy there. And I think this is well as a good summing up. This is one of three summing up, I should say. I can never sum up in one slide. This is one, it's a direct result of what it is because of citizen advocacy. It's a long thanks to our members. First and foremost, we've had the most dedicated members. All our allied organizations, and simply those who have visited the Spit and come away with smiles. And then we thank those in power who listened, and we talked about David Crombie. We talked about the staff and board of the TRCA, particularly Brian Denny, who led them through this big change from engineering solutions to soft green solutions in the city of Toronto. And we thank all of those various people who provided our slides and things like that. And then just to end off, and that says it all.
That was great, guys.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. That was great. I certainly have done my fair share of biking on the Spit and hiking around, so I totally appreciate it. And so does my wife. Is there any questions we have for this evening? I have one question, which maybe will start us off. So besides, you talked about the visitor experience plan. You talked a little bit about the revenue sharing. Is there other things that you guys would like to see in that?
I from my standpoint, it's the stability and the maintenance. City Parks is joined with the TRCA, and Parks is in a rough way right now. They're trying to find their way, and we need people at Parks who get the spit. I mean, I was down there one time 2 years ago, and there's a guy with a weed whacker, and that's precisely what you don't need along the road and paths. But he was sent down there because somebody sent him down. We need that sort of maintenance. We need it to be looked after. Even the native plantings around the pavilion have gone all to heck because no one looks after them. I mean, everybody talks about Highline Park in New York City. I believe they've got 12 full-time gardeners or people looking after it. I mean, it's a massive investment. It's a massive maintenance. We need not that type of maintenance, but we need maintenance and we need it assured. We also, I think, need a vehicle for the handicapped or for those who have mobility concerns, something that can take people, get those people out, well out onto the spit so they can enjoy it way out there at all seasons. Garth?
No, I think you covered it. One of my biggest pet peeves is the lack of presence of anybody in authority on the spit. So it's pretty much the Wild West out there on most days, and we're fortunate that we have a lot of members out there on a daily basis that keep us in the loop, and we usually know what's going down long before the TRCA ever does.
Nice. Yeah, I think handicapped access would be quite a nice
Yeah.
feature out there.
And there was a TTC bus in the 80s that went out to the Red Bridge and turned around at the loop there. And so for the price of your TTC, you just rode it continually down Leslie right out on your halfway out. That was pretty good.
Gentlemen, we've had a question whether there's any further advice that you can offer about the best way to offer views. You've mentioned though this coming weekend, and then the 15th, and then the public meetings. Do you know anything more, any more detail about the public meetings?
No, this visitor experience plan, we're now in year 4.5 of a 3-year plan. So it's going very slowly. We're told that in the new year there will be public meetings. We don't know whether they're going to be in person or Zoom or how they're going to be controlled. We're told that this process will be ongoing. As soon as we know anything, we'll post it on our Facebook and through a newsletter how people can comment for sure. And we'll post it to TFN, of course, so you can reach your members.
Yes. And I would suggest that people check the Tommy Thompson Park website as well, because the TRCA has been rather poor at communicating, and they rely heavily on their website to communicate to the public. So that's a good place to check once a week at least.
Okay.
Okay. Don't see any hands up, or I don't see any other questions.
Well, I guess the first pitch is being thrown in a minute, so I
Could be a factor.
I guess that's or either that, or I can't believe we covered all the subjects. But the other thing, Garth and I both want to say is, if anybody's got questions that they'd like to email us, please do so through our website, and we'll be happy to answer questions, to guide people, or whatever we can do to help. And we appreciate all your support.
Yeah, for sure.
Thank you so much, guys.
Thank you.
Thank
Have
you.
a great evening, everyone, and go Jays, go.
Okay.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Thanks.
That's the stop recording.